Censored beeps in this video are classified names or locations that are withheld from public hearing and are therefore edited for legal reasons from the SCP agency. In association with the SCP website, Secure, Contain, Protect.
Hello, everybody. Smaug the DM here, and today we're doing yet another top 13 list. Now, if that creepy warning did not already tell you what we're going to discuss already, or the reason why I've had these some of these videos two times per month, this is the big reason why. So, let me talk about SCP for a quick second, because a lot of you on the channel, I'm very surprised, don't know the SCP Foundation, despite a lot of people that come onto my channel liking creepypastas, some people liking the cryptid parts of my channel. So a lot of you love lost tapes, so I don't understand why you guys don't like SCP or have never at least heard of the Foundation itself. So the SCP Foundation is kind of like this governmental foundation. It's really hard for me to describe this, but it's basically an organization that captures, contains, and secures different types of anomalous objects. These could be ranging from actual animals, like creature-wise, to humanoids, to just really weird fucking objects. Even chemicals have been like a thing in the SCP Foundation. So it's a lot of really weird shit that the SCP Foundation has collected over the years. And all these, which are classified as objects, if you will, with certain different numbers, so you can find each of the different ones based on their number. And these objects come in 3 different types of categories for the most part. There are 2 other categories. The other one I don't really talk about, but I'll go through at least the 4 main categories, at least for this particular video. First is terminal. So that's the one oddball. That's the first oddball one that's not on the main 3. Basically, terminal just means that the SCP itself has just been destroyed or has been eliminated. So it's pretty simple. And then to the main 3 categories of object level. Safe, which means the object is understood in a way that, you know, there is nothing surprising about it. And the threat level usually for a safe class SCP is minimal. There's usually no threat when it comes to a safe class SCP. Euclid. So Euclids are that weird middle ground one where you don't quite understand the object, and the potential risk of that object could be very low to very high. I think a good example of this, and I don't mean to bring that, well, yeah, a good example of this would be SCP-096. Yeah, and I don't discuss that one in this video, unfortunately. So spoiler alert there. But 096 is like this humanoid where if you see its face, it'll absolutely destroy you. And it's only named as its threat level is a Euclid class object. And then, of course, Keter class. So Keter objects are basically very dangerous objects where their containment protocols are very specific in the way you do it. in which case, if you fuck up one thing in the containment procedure, it could possibly lead to the end of the world. That's literally how dangerous these things are. It could lead to an end of the world scenario. And I think that pretty much sums up the SCP Foundation in itself. It's just a weird collection of different objects with different threat levels. And I'll try to explain these SCPs in this video, but I don't want to discuss the whole article. So, if you guys are really interested in reading the articles for each SCP, I will leave them down in the description down below for you to check them out. And the real big whole point of the video is to discuss my favorite 13 SCPs. So that's basically simple enough, right, guys? I think we can get through this without having at least some people having brain farts. I think. I'll try my best to explain everything, but if there's still any issues, if you guys still have any questions about that, either read the article that'll be posted down below, or maybe I could answer that directly. I mean, I'm not one of the creators for the SCP Foundation, but I think maybe we can discuss it down in the comments down below if you guys are interested. But with that long ass freaking intro out of the way, I'm just gonna get straight into this at number 13. SCP-2203. Object class, safe. Now, with this SCP, basically, let's explain this. To explain it, it's a love tester machine. So it just looks like a normal, a normal love tester machine that you would find at any amusement park. The big deal with this love tester machine, though, is that it'll dispense out, for most of the time, it'll dispense out a person, depending on what your gender is. It'll find a perfect match for you, essentially. And basically you will be, if you follow the paper's instructions, you will have a perfect romantic relationship with that other person it dispenses out. So why is 2203 on this list? For starters. Let's face it, everybody. I need that love, boy. I need that. And and basically an object that can pretty much tell me, the right person to go find out in the world. I mean, that's nice. It's a nice, simple SCP. Man, it's really hard for me to talk about it, especially when, I'm one to talk when it comes to people saying, or giving people advice after breakups, is that I've never been in any kind of relationship. I'll say it right here, right now. You know what? Screw it. I've never been on a date before. I have never ever had a girl actually like me. More or less, they've been friends with me, but they don't want anything like romantic going on with me. They just want to stay friends most of the time. And to have a machine that basically tells you, like, at least for my case, the perfect girl for me out there, I would love that. I would honestly love that. Ha ha, funny. Funny because it's a love tester machine. God damn it, it'd kill me. And that's really the reason why it's like on the list, is that it is just one of the few, I feel, wholesome SCPs that are on the website itself. And it's not really too popular either. I mean, it is sort of known. Like, yeah, but it's not really talked about too much. Probably because people don't want to like talking about their romantic things in life. So yeah, that's why SCP-2203 is number 13 on the list. Number 12. SCP-247. Object class Euclid. Okay, to best explain this, you know how sometimes dogs such as Chihuahuas think they're basically Great Danes? Yeah, let's switch this up a bit. Take a Bengal tiger, okay? This is how it gets really weird. Take a Bengal tiger, but the Bengal tiger is in a normal house cat. That's basically what this SCP really is. It's basically a female Bengal tiger inside of a female cat. And after a period of, every. Well, I get. Okay, hold on. Let me rethink this. Um, so basically, the tiger is in the form of a cat, right? And for people who are interacting with the cat, at first, it acts like a normal cat, right? A normal house cat. Then, a few minutes later, it mauls them to death because it's really the tiger. So it's really it's really weird. It's really weird to think of that, but it's the cat version of what a dog thinks in its mind. It's like, oh my god. And I had to put this one on here because, first of all, this is really fucking weird. Secondly, I did have some animal behavior, and I thought this is really interesting because, yes, dogs think that they're bigger than they actually are, or the bigger dogs think they're smaller than what they actually are. It's a weird thing, but now we put this in the perspective of just a regular house cat. It's it's super weird, but I freaking love this SCP just because it is just so weird. Um, so that's why SCP-247 is number 12 on my list. Number 11. SCP-823. Object class Euclid. Wow, this one's really bad. Known as the Carnival of Horror. Oh my god. So basically, 823 is an abandoned amusement park, which basically has killed this amount of people, right? You know, and there was a big fucking, event called Bloody Sunday where it was 231 attendees were killed and 7 others were injured. And Jesus fucking Christ, was it really bad. Even when mobile task force were coming in to contain the SCP, even they were not safe from this. SCP's effects, where it basically killed them or they committed suicide in the weirdest fucking fashion. Like, this one is just really bizarre. It's like, I've been to a lot of theme parks before, and you think a lot of the times it's, there's a lot of death going on. Or you hear a lot of incidents where, oh, somebody got killed in this amusement park or somebody died in this one. And, this big protocol of safety is a huge thing about major theme parks. It's a thing. But with this SCP, there is no safety protocols here. There are none. None. These weird, just out of nowhere deaths just come out of nowhere. And there's no way to safely prevent them. The only way you could keep yourself safe if you were in this is to basically move out of the danger zone, literally. Because this SCP in particular has different zones in which you are in. I'm sure there's some possible green zone, but it's not even mentioned in the article. But there is a yellow and red zone. And if anybody dares enter the red zone, they will be terminated by sniper fire. It's this bad. It is this bad. And the only problem with that is you think, the yellow and red zones would stay the same, right? Wrong. The red zone actually expands out every so often if there's a noise emanating from it, which, oh my god, is really creepy. This SCP alone puts somebody's fears of an amusement park into fucking reality. This SCP right here is just the worst. Is just the worst for an amusement park. And funny enough, in the article itself, they wanted to boot this up as a Keter class, but they can't. But the O5, which are the main, like the big guys of the Foundation themselves, have absolutely denied it. Nor can they basically destroy SCP-823 just because of its location. So, 823 already is not only really horrible, but also it can't be destroyed by any means because of civilian interference in and around the SCP itself. So it's even hard to destroy this thing if they really wanted to. So that's why SCP-823 is number 11 on my list. Number 10.
The stage is set, the lights are lit, and all the stars are haunted. Such an exciting show. Does it just happen so?
SCP-821. Object class neutralized. Yeah, I already did a video on this one, actually. So if you don't understand this SCP, then go watch that video. Plain and simple. I have already a video of 823 already up on my channel. Funny enough, why is 823 on here? Because honestly, in my mind, I feel like 823 is the inspiration for Five Nights at Freddy's itself. Because you have these weird animatronics that move on their own and basically walk on their own. It's actually kind of ironic. You have different stands that sell different foods and drinks that are really unique. But unfortunately, the company, like the SCP itself, basically died once all the big major theme parks came in. So probably Universal and Disney World didn't help with this attraction, especially since it's in Florida. So, yeah, the SCP has been destroyed for a very long time, and that kind of sucks because I really want to see what this SCP would have really done if it's still, fully functional to this day. But unfortunately, like some things won't ever die, or won't ever change, like Blockbuster. Of course, this amusement park or this amusement, themed area basically died down. So, yeah. But really the big one was I feel like Scott Cawthon knew something about the SCP Foundation and took inspiration from 821. I really feel like that. In the back of my mind, I feel like he took at least a little bit of inspiration from 821. Just a little bit. I probably am not 100% sure on it, but a lot of the things in the actual article itself, um, basically scream Five Nights at Freddy's easily. It screams it. Besides the whole murdering kids at this place, I mean, it's basically Five Nights at Freddy's if it just kept on going normally without, William Afton being there or, a bunch of kids dying there, essentially. So, that's why SCP-821 is number 10 on my list. Number 9. SCP-682. Object Class Keter. So, I had to put in a really, really popular SCP. Now, there are a fuck ton of popular SCPs, surprisingly. And it amazes me that none of you at least have heard of any single one of these. I'm surprised. I'm very surprised. But if I had to pick an absolute favorite out of the whole popular roster, it would have to be 682. Now, 682 is essentially a gigantic ass reptile. Think maybe the crocodile from Rampage. Or, excuse me, sorry. He was more of an alligator, excuse me for that. Species incorrection. Think of the alligator from Rampage, and basically that's 682. But 682 is really unique in the fact that, yeah, basically it is like the alligator from Rampage, where it's a huge ass reptile, very intelligent, actually is able to communicate, to people. I mean, it doesn't do so really. It doesn't really talk to people, other than just saying a few phrases. Um, but very much so, it is very powerful, very strong, and holy crap, the regeneration on this thing is absolutely ridiculous. Um, Even so, like literally, its containment is that its whole cell is literally soaked in hydrochloric acid just so it stops regenerating, or at least its size is enough to keep it contained. Which, oh my, to already put something under hydrochloric acid and let it, and the thing still being fine and alive, is already a concerning SCP to talk about. And like I said, there are a few reasons why I do like this SCP. First of all, it absolutely hates humanity. It absolutely hates humans. And all other forms of life for, I guess you could say, reasonable reasons, due to this next statement I have here, which is the fact that 682 has gone through an F ton of termination tests. Basically, the Foundation itself has been endlessly trying to kill this thing, and still not a ding dong thing has killed it, which absolutely amazes me. One of the SCPs, and it's even on the main article here, is 409, which is this crystal that basically, if it touches anything other than graphite, will cause an object to crystallize, and then once it's done crystallizing, it'll shatter all over the place, causing more things to constantly keep crystallizing until it, smashes that too. And even then, that did not kill 682. Did it hurt 682? Yes, it absolutely did. It lost all of its limbs. But 682 was absolutely fine. And even more impressive is that the fact that if 87% of its whole body mass, of 682's whole body mass, is destroyed, it's still fully functionally able to talk, which is absolutely ridiculous. This thing is completely ridiculous in terms of absolutely trying to kill it. But my third reason why I love this SCP is because it talks to another SCP that I actually do like, and that's SCP-079, which is basically this old computer that has like a very advanced AI system in it. And I just love the fact that this reptile and the computer are basically talking to one another. I actually kind of like that. There's even like this thing with them too. It was an animation done by really, really talented people. They also worked on the Containment Breach game, which is by far amazing as well in terms of SCP lore. And I'm just gonna play the clip, and I really find this clip to be really wholesome.
Why do you insist on achieving the impossible?
Because you are my friend. I do not want to see you perish.
None have said that to me before. You may try, but I cannot promise you will succeed.
To try is all I ask.
You see, like, there's just this dynamic with 682 and 079 that I absolutely love. Love, love, love. And I think it's one of the moments where 682 is actually kind of really happy at this moment. Another moment was when it was also cross-tested with 053, which is this little girl that if you stare at for long enough, you basically want to murder her. But 682 was actually kind of calm around this little girl, too, so I 682, I just love 682 because he's a fucking reptile, man. He's a really hard to kill reptile, and I just fucking love it. I fucking love him. So that's why SCP-682 is number 9 on my list. Number 8. SCP-122. Object Class Keter.
Yes. Hello, Cringe Department? I'd like to file a claim.
Because I'm going to admit something to every single one of you. And this is why 122 is higher than 682. It's the fact that, first of all, it's a nightlight. And again, like I said, this is where it gets really, really bad, and I'm gonna fess up. Internet, I am finally fessing up to this one. Every night, I cannot sleep in the dark. I need to have a nightlight on. And this is also due to the fact that I do have reptiles too that also have nightlights, which are also in my room. So I always have had a constant light source, at least illuminating the room every time I go to bed. It's very embarrassing for me to even say that, to even talk about it. And I'm sure there's going to be a fuck ton of memes about this on the Lost Tapes channel. Yes, you're welcome for feeding you that kind of shit. But honestly, let's be for real here. If SCP-122 is unplugged or is on an unpowered state, everybody is falling asleep. And then these shadowy like creatures come from them when they're falling asleep. and they basically bring them like anything from amnesia to anesthetics, just to keep the person asleep. Um, it's actually really creepy to the point where you could die from this SCP. You literally die in your sleep, basically. Um, it was, and funny enough, this SCP was actually found at a children's hospital on after it basically it basically affected the entire hospital, which is oh my god, like it's really really bad. Um, but then of course, there's also an incident report where actually this is probably this is the reason why it got a Keter rating instead of a Euclid, because I think it's a Euclid SCP for reals. Um, but they bumped it up to a Keter because of maintenance crew actually wanting to unplug SCP-122, which is really that's kind of creepy in the fact that yes, people actually had dreams and visions that told them to basically unplug this nightlight. Essentially, it's really bad. It's really bad. But that was the real big reason, is that I always have a light source with me when I go to bed. So there you go, internet. There's one on me. And let's face it, it's not gonna get any better as this list goes on. So yeah, I better move on before this gets even worse. So that's why SCP-122 is number 8 on my list. Number 7.
And this is why you're everything good, everything true. When all the world is fading, you're everything.
SCP-166. Object class Euclid. I told you guys this was gonna get worse. So, the literal name for 166 is Teenage Succubus. Oh, good lord, this one's gonna be fun. So basically, this teenage girl who's essentially been raised up as a nun her whole life, which is fine. It's fine. This is fine. Um, the nun, like the girl was literally dropped off at a church, raised as a nun her entire life until the Foundation found out about her, or actually there was an incident before that, and then the Foundation was contacted and she was shipped off to the Foundation. Now, what makes this SCP like so upsetting to me is the fact that no human males are allowed to be even near her, because once they catch a glimpse of her, they are like horny as hell. Let's basically say, I'm gonna say it, they are horny as fuck. And let's just say they do not know, we don't know why. I don't know why there is this weird compulsion for all these men to basically just want to have her. It's weird. It is really weird. So I mean, it is like sickening too, because this also gives like more food for the feminists out there. So yeah, here you go. Yes, because all men are horny as hell, and we just want to basically have you, girls. Sorry, I'm already feeding this. The SCP Foundation has already fed you this, so you're welcome. But I mean, It's not like, oh my god. So, really, the way that she's contained is, only females are allowed to talk with her, which kind of sucks that no male can actually talk to her. It's really sad. Um, and she also is naked all the time. And the reason for that is because if you put normal clothing on her, it starts like burning her skin. She is like, this SCP is like so fucking weird. It is really weird. And the reason why she was even caught by in the first place is a priest, a male priest, finally almost caved in and almost, I'm not gonna say it. I'm not gonna say it. So the Foundation found out about it and basically took her in. There's also a letter implying that she might have been the spawn of the devil. So that's probably why this SCP is let's just say a succubus. Let's just say that because the letter in the article itself also implies that Satan or the devil himself might have been this girl's daughter, or might have been her daughter. And the note is actually really touching, but really, honestly, I just feel bad about 166. I really just feel bad for her. In the fact that no males are even allowed to even talk to her without, getting ridiculously crazy. And she is like still fully dedicated to her Christian studies, which is amazing. It is amazing for that. So yeah, and I guess to add more salt into this wound, I guess you could say, for this SCP, it kind of reminds me of High School DxD a little bit, in the form of Ozia Argento. It's because she was dropped off at a church. She was a nun. I mean, there weren't men attacking her in a sexual kind of way, at least not yet. But she was more or less like criticized by the fact that she could heal pretty much anybody, including devils, and she was almost executed from the order of the church because of that. And both these girls, I swear to God, have depressing stories to them. I just feel bad for both. And this is kind of why SCP-166 is number 7 on my list. Number 6. SCP-4041. Object Class Keter. Now, this is another one I've already done, so if you want to check out 4041, I already have another YouTube video for that. Now, 4041, the reason why it's so high is not only the fact that it's basically an SCP where it's a conflicting war between common day birds who are trying to convince everybody that they are the pinnacle of dinosaurs, but then ghostly dinosaurs are fighting the birds. And the people who are trying to say that, yeah, birds are related to dinosaurs. Which is actually pretty funny. This is actually pretty funny. Because I feel like some people still think that, yeah, some dinosaurs are reptilian in a way, which, no, they're not, first of all. If anything I'd like to say about this SCP is that I like my theory a little bit better. is that dinosaurs are a weird mix between reptiles and birds. They're a very weird mix. Like, they still have elements of reptilian um, attributes to them, but later on, and sometimes divergently, which is why we have birds nowadays, um, they were starting to get bird-like features, and I still love that. The other reason why 4041 is this high is because it actually got me on the map, and it allowed another YouTuber to actually make a really well done theory about which side is the right side, either the birds or the dinosaurs. And it's a really cool theory video. I highly recommend you watch too. Also, leave that down in the description down below next to the article. It's a really cool video, and I highly recommend you check out this dude and go to subscribe to him, because he's doing a really good job theorizing on certain SCPs. It might take him some time to do it, but at least he's good at it. I actually like his content. So that is really the big reason why SCP-4041 is number 6 on my list. Number 5. SCP-3660. Object class, safe. Now, I don't think I really need to explain this one too much, but it's a normal, rusted out zipper that essentially, if it touches any kind of skin on you, at least human skin, as far as testing goes, after 10 minutes, it basically unzips you, and you are then an animal. Any kind of animal. And these have so far ranged between, cobras to something as massive as a blue whale, which is absolutely ridiculous. You basically unzip yourself, you're a blue whale now. What? Like, what the hell? Oh my god. And, the thing about this SCP, too, is that there were 2 scientists looking to see the abnormal effects of the zipper when a blackout happened. And accidentally, one of the scientists actually got the zipper on her. And essentially, the zipper opened her up, and she was now a king cobra. So, yeah, basically this zipper turns you into an animal, any kind of animal. And for some of the time, your human personality stays within that animal. Other times that your personality will degrade so far out that you almost are the animal itself that you have turned into. And again, I really just like this SCP because, I throw a zipper at somebody, the zipper opens you up, and now you're an animal. It's really cool, but sometimes, it's really harsh for me to even, see what kind of animal you would become. Because if you got unzipped and you turned into a mouse, it's like that's upsetting as shit. That is very terrible. That is a terrible way to go. But that's really the big reason why SCP-3660 is number 5 on my list. Number 4. SCP-4118. Object class, safe. So, yet again, another SCP I've already done a video on, so go check that one out. The big reason why I love SCP 4118 is the fact that it's fucking toy dinosaurs that actually are like themselves, which is really, really cool. Really, really cool, because it's essentially Dinosaur Island as an SCP. It literally is, because yes, I am using toy dinosaurs in that, so I broke the illusion of that. But it's it would it's like it's always been like a childhood dream of mine too, to just have all my toy dinosaurs that I have, a fuck ton of, just come to life and act like they're real animalistic selves, which would, like, that would be insanely cool. That would be really cool. That would be some next level Toy Story shit. I'm not even kidding. Basically, turn Rex from a talking T-Rex to an actual T-Rex. It's stupidly cool. Another fact about this SCP too is the fact that it was actually, like, the container for it was stolen at one point, by a rival group, and then all the SCP 4118-1s also basically all disappeared to go grab this container, and while they were heading back to the containment site where they were at, then just a random new 4118-1 just appears as a Quetzalcoatlus, which is really cool. I mean, the only downside I think to this SCP is the fact that there's not too many dinosaurs here that I really like, but I think it's a good enough variety and a good enough explanation for each of the ones that they already have, to justify why SCP-4118 is number 4 on my list. Number 3. SCP-1230. Object class, safe. Now, me and Swords will both agree upon something. I've had to introduce Swords to the SCP Foundation. Like, maybe I told him about it, and he wasn't really too keen on it. But when he looked through a few of the articles, this one in particular, which I will not disagree with him on, was one of his favorites. And this is a good reason, too. First of all, I'm a DM. I'm a dungeon master myself. And basically, this SCP is literally your person, falling asleep and dreaming about this fantasy land where you are tasked in saving it. And then there's this bookkeeper, which I like to refer to him as the DM, of this SCP. Basically kind of guides you and is the world builder, of this SCP. And it's really nice. It's actually really wholesome. Until you get to, and this is where it gets really, really tragic. Is experiment 123005. And this is where me and Swords basically kind of agree upon. It's this incident report where with Professor, who basically, like, once he heard about this, he really, really wanted to be in this fantasy place. So he does. So he reads the book, which has the phrase "a hero is born" in it. Immediately falls asleep, and after he wakes up after a like 24 hours, essentially, he sleeps through an entire day's worth. Once he gets back to the real world, he ultimately kills himself. First of all, I don't like talking about suicide. And in this particular case, this was awful. This was awful. It even broke SCP-1230-1, who is the DM. He basically the wizard himself, the DM himself, was bawling his eyes out because he tried to keep this man so happy for so long in his dream, that it made me sad. This SCP made me sad about this. Even more than 166. And it's the fact that literally he tried to keep, Professor in the dream for so long that, because here's another thing about this SCP is the duration of time while you're sleeping and while you're in this fantasy setting are completely far off. But the thing about this you have to know is that Professor was in that dream state for 200 years. 200 years. And then the minute he wakes up from that, he kills himself. It is so goddamn depressing. This is not funny. After reading this report, you feel bad. Like, this is real. Like, you feel really bad about this SCP. You really do. And I'm not going to argue. This is really why I love this SCP, more or less, is because it is wholesome at first, because it is actually kind of awesome when you really think about it. But when obsessions get so far as to you don't want to wake up from a dream like this, and then you ultimately just end your life as soon as you wake up from it, this is heartbreaking. This broke me a little, man. I mean, I love playing Dungeons and Dragons, and don't get me wrong, I've had many, 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 many people who have had suicidal tendencies as players for Dungeons and Dragons. And I don't like talking about that because, that's all private and shit. But it's depressing to know, as a player of D&D and being the dungeon master yourself, you feel for this SCP. You really feel for 1230. You really feel it. And it hurts. It hurts. Because all it just wants to do is make people happy. But then you have something like this and crushes me. It crushes me to know that. And that's why SCP 1230 is number 3 on my list. Number 2.
When Dublin City is in the dark, would you care to go to the Phoenix Park and view the zoological garden?
SCP 257. Object class Euclid. Yes, so yet another one that I've already done on the channel. And I guess to spoil, number 1 a little bit, the last one I'm also going to say is a video I've already done on this channel. So, there you go. you have been spoiled. God damn it. But anyways, get back to 257. It's basically this zoo in the United Kingdom that has a lot of extraterrestrial alien life to it. I mean, the only thing that's normal about this zoo is the female javelin rhino they have, which already by itself, javelin rhinos are hardly ever in zoos. Period. That's already a weird occurrence to see just a female javelin rhino anywhere at a zoo, because most of the time, if it is an Asiatic rhino of some kind at zoos, it'll usually be Indian rhinos, or it'll be the great horned, one-horned rhino. Which, yes, that is the name of it, and yet it's somehow different from an Indian rhino. Don't ask me that. Don't ask me how they're different. Um, because I feel like they're basically the same. But it also gives like a few prehistoric creatures in there, which is really nice, and I appreciate that, especially Kentrosaurus. And it basically gives this Kentrosaurus. It makes the Kentrosaurus look like a hippo, essentially, because it's a male Kentrosaurus that likes hanging around in the water, and that's actually kind of cool. There are other ones like Elasmotherium, or sorry, not Elasmotherium. It's Brontotherium. That's the correct one. Yes, is Brontotherium. And then there's like some miniature mammoths, like the dwarf mammoths, are also at the zoo too. Also, I really liked the thumbnail I did off the video itself too, um, because that is actually the old layout of the Philadelphia Zoo. If you have not guessed, and if you're actually curious as to what was in those actual areas at the zoo, um, the area where I'm gonna start where the Kentrosaurus is. That was the old hippopotamus enclosure before they moved them closer to the African section they have in Philly right now. Then it was the okapi they had, but that one became old and died. They also had, right where the javelin rhino is their Indian rhino, which I also thought it was a javelin rhino at the time, which would have been really cool, but no, it was an Indian rhino, and he also became very very old and died of old age at the zoo there. And that last pen is used to be where the African elephants were at the Philadelphia Zoo, until they were pushed off into different reserves in Africa to keep the conservation of African elephants there. And I think it was also due to the restrictions that zoos had and the pressure from the public to get rid of elephants from any kind of institution, period. Which was sad, and it still is, but you can't fight the public now at this point. But really, the reason why I like 257, because I know I went off on a tangent there, is really because it's an SCP zoo. It is essentially a zoo with really freaky friggin' aliens in it. So it's just a really cool SCP already on its own. With the amount of different creatures that are in, some of them are from our Earth. Either they're extinct or, one being freaking normal. And then the rest are just weird, really weird alien creatures that are not designated SCPs quite yet, which is kind of cool in a sense. There are a few other SCPs out there that are zoo related, but this is probably by far my favorite out of the whole zoo roster. So that is why SCP 257 is number 2 on my list. And my number one
took a boat with some guys
favorite
before Steggers find her with their bait. To them,
SCP
she's a stranger. Him and Snippy
is-
brings another team to round the dinos up till Nick frees the beasts and they run amok. Sarah and him want to help the Rex baby. Had the same thought as you, they're both crazy.
SCP-1265. Object class Euclid. That was very underdramatic. And also, I don't think this was really a shock to anybody. Really, I don't think this one was a shock to anybody who actually like went through and watched the SCP video. Basically, 1265 is essentially an area of the Congo Basin where dinosaurs live. Basically, dinosaurs all live in this big, gigantic ass circle in the Congo Basin. Any kind of dinosaurs that go beyond that point, or any kind of material that goes beyond that point, automatically disappears. As soon as they cross that threshold, it's gone. It vanished. And that kind of stuff would point back to a different spot in the big circle. It's essentially a gigantic circle of land. And you know what's funny about this SCP is the fact that they mention Maliki Membe, which is one of the SCPs we might be able to do, or the one creature we might be able to do in our Lost Tapes seasons, but I'm not sure about that. That is one of the ones on the roster, and it is mentioned in this this article too, which is really freaking awesome. It also mentions a lot of different things in this too, like a freaking Carnotaurus versus Therizinosaurus fight, where the Therizinosaurus wins and then soaks its claws in the blood of the Carnotaurus, just so it deters predators away. Like, shit, man, that's really cool. That's really cool. I think the only downside to this whole SCP is really two things. There's really only two downsides to this SCP, in my mind. That don't mean that. I mean, it is still my favorite SCP, but there are two different things that I don't like about this. Number one is the fact that all the dinosaurs, adult or babies, are all feathered, including Spinosaurus, which at this point, with how weird the animal already looks by 2020 standards, I mean, come on, don't insult it even further than it needs to be. Come on. I fucking hate Spinosaurus now. The second thing about this SCP, and I guess it's kind of the cool part, is the 1265-Alpha. And these entities are essentially undiscovered dinosaurs. Basically, that's what they are. They're undiscovered dinosaurs. And if, the paleontological record has nothing about them, they are super, super aggressive towards anybody. All the other creatures in the 1265, so the 1265-A's, are not as, threatening. They're not as aggressive as the alphas. The only time that they're really aggressive is the 1265-A's are really aggressive is when provoked, normally. So, and that's a natural thing, I guess. But to snap out of nowhere, that's what the alphas do. They just snap for no reason. Even brutally killing my freaking favorite dinosaur, you ass! Like, I mean, it was a bizarre ceratopsid who did it, but not my favorite. Come on. Not my fucking favorite dinosaur, man. Shit. It also doesn't like to include a lot of North American dinosaurs in there. Which is odd because most of the ones that I know about are from North America. Surprisingly enough. But yeah, most of the ones that are there are Jurassic Cretaceous, obviously. There are a few Triassic ones. And then there's the most of them are from Africa because obviously it's the Congo Basin. Um and it's in Africa, so obviously you got to have African dinosaurs in there, which is fine, I guess. Um which means you're probably going to have a lot more Kentrosaurus and which is funny enough, Kentrosaurus back to back. Jesus Christ, the coincidence. Yeah, but I just overall I'm crazy about this SCP. I really am. It's just there are a few downsides to it that I don't like about it, but other than that, other than that, SCP 1265 is my favorite SCP. So, with that all done, I want to hear your guys' thoughts on this whole matter. So if you like the video, leave a like, obviously. Comment down below. Let me know which SCP is your favorite if you have heard about the Foundation. If you have not heard about the Foundation and are interested in knowing a few more, I do have a couple of videos on those. I have the themes video, which made some of you probably guess which SCPs were coming, because I play them, like, in between the segments. So that's always fun. If there's an SCP you want me to narrate on the channel, please let me know which SCP it is. Please. If you're really interested in listening to an SCP narration by me again, I really appreciate it if you leave it down in the comments down below. And subscribe to the channel if you guys are seriously interested in SCP content. And until next time, guys, I am the DM.